And we're live, back at it again a couple days later. Lots of Bears news, the ClubDub Podcast, presented by SportsMockery.com. Eric, Drew, and Kevin. Told you guys we'd be back a couple times. You know, we're going for weekly shows. We are back in a ton of news these last couple hours, even. Bears did exactly what I said. Glad they listened. I'm glad I know so much about football. I'm glad they listened to this football czar mind. They went out and got offensive linemen. Roquan Smith, he reports, quote unquote. We're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about Robert Quinn, Jalen Johnson with some really strong words today on the new regime, and Roquan Smith. We'll talk about him and his leadership. We'll talk about Justin Fields, his relationship with Darnell Mooney. He's ready to lead, and just a ton of moves, guys. So how do we do keeping up with everything today?
Honestly, thought I did pretty well. You know, so many things happened away from the press conferences, which is kind of what threw everything, for a loop. The signings, and then, being able to get Jaquan Brisker in, the whole Roquan situation. It all sort of happened in one gigantic avalanche. It was kind of hard to process there for a minute, but once you sorted it all out, a lot of positive stuff for the Bears.
Yeah, I struggled, honestly. I was trying to catch up on the press conference not too long before this, and I didn't get through everything, but I think I got the main pieces. And I liked how, Ryan Pace, I already did it. Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, handled their conference. They were obviously peppered with questions about Roquan Smith, and thought they handled it well. So I was just excited to have real news back again, teams from all over reporting. It's a good time of year.
Yeah, certainly so. Already got a comment in there from Rich Brown. Appreciate it, guys. Comment, hit the like button on our YouTube page. This is the ClubDub Podcast. If you're just first tuning in, we've been doing shows for about just over a year now here on Sports Mockery, and we're Talk Bears, obviously. Ton of news today. I'm just glad to have football back. And truth be told, yesterday was one of those things where everyone up in arms. What the hell? And myself included, I'll say it. Roquan Smith is the leader of your defense. He's your best player by miles. And the fact that he said he's going to, hold out and not practice because of a contract thing gets a lot of people ticked off, especially when this is a new regime. You got a defensive-minded head coach who wants to make Roquan a big part of the defense. He doesn't play the most important position on that defense, but he's still your leader. He's still your best player. It made me mad initially because it's something that's you want to, we just, especially, I think it might just be Cubs fatigue or some other fatigue. We just don't have a good reputation these last couple of years of treating our star athletes like star athletes. And it appears that they are at an impasse on a contract, but Roquan reports anyway. He's going to be there. He's not going to practice. It's more of like a sit-in, but he's there for his team. I think that says a lot.
Well, there's a lot of penalties now because of the new CBA for actual holdouts from training camp. So players have sort of shifted to that hold in where they're at training camp, but they're not going to practice until the contract situation is resolved. TJ Watt did the same thing last year. They eventually got a deal worked out. So that worked out fine. He ended up having the best season of his career. So, I don't think that's going to impact Roquan too much. But the difference is, as we discussed in the last podcast, Watt has an agent. Roquan doesn't. So his influences in regards to this whole contract situation is much more challenging for Ryan Poles because he doesn't have a regular representative that he's used to communicating with. He has to communicate with the player himself. And the player, in this case, Roquan, can't devote all of his energy to getting this deal done. He also has to focus on film study, working out, all that sort of stuff. So it only furthers the complications and the trickiness of this entire situation.
Yeah, I think I got from Poles that they're very dedicated to trying to get this worked out. You mentioned, look, none of this changes my opinion of Roquan Smith as a player, as a person. And I honestly think even if the CBA didn't call for these penalties, I think a hold-in would have been the approach that Roquan Smith takes anyway. He doesn't want to put his body at risk, but he wants to be there for installs. He wants to be there for his teammates. He's that kind of leader. So I think this would have worked out anyway. But yeah, honestly, we were talking about this last night, right? I mean, does it make sense for the Bears to extend Roquan Smith if they get, let's say, a massive trade offer for them? And it's an interesting conversation. We can have that later. But I think for this scheme, I think for the position that Smith will play, obviously he's a homegrown player. He is everything you want in a leader. It seems it's a no-brainer to kind of get this deal done, especially with the cap situation the Bears find themselves in next year. So I'm hoping it's a quick little bump in the road and they get this done and we can kind of punt this for the next 5 years. But, credit to Roquan for showing up and being there for his teammates with or without the financial penalties, and credit for the Bears for saying the right things today.
If you guys don't, if you're just following or reading along now, I highly suggest following these guys on social media because you do learn a lot from what they post. And some guys are more cryptic than others. But Roquan Smith is, even when he held out as a rookie, I mean, there was posts in there about, he wanted to play. And there was a post a couple days ago that he goes, when the smoke clears, Roquan going to be there. So he's clearly, could be talking about contract, could just be a, quarterback sack joke, whatever. It could be anything like that. But it seems to be a contract thing. But it was a picture of him in the Bears' new uniforms with the new helmet. So he clearly supports this franchise. He wants to be here. Clearly, guys want him to be here. Jaquan Johnson today on If Rowe didn't show up, he goes, shitty. I mean, he's our leader. So they know that. I think both sides of the ball know that. And you can really do a deeper dive and see what players are liking each other's posts and reposting. And it really does kind of say more than just, people want to bag on social media, but oftentimes you can learn a lot about these guys just surfing through that and doing a little bit of a journalistic look at it. And going back to the CBA, Eric, I'm looking at this article talking about, so the maximum fine for skipping training camp is up to $50,000 a day for players not on their rookie contracts. So Roquan obviously still on his rookie deal. So he can be fined it's $40,000, between $40,000 and $50,000 a day. And there's also, like, if you don't perform for a certain amount of time, I believe you can also be fined for doing a sit-in. So I think that's up to organizational. I'd have to do a deeper dive on that, but I think it's all up to what Ryan Poles would discuss. But I think what we're hearing from these guys is they're being held accountable. So maybe you're right. Maybe that's another, got to protect the wallet too, right? I mean, check still got to cash. So I get that.
I mean, Poles made it clear that from all accounts, he wants Roquan to be there. He's a great player. He's already seen everything. It seems he likes the personality as well, a great leader for the defense. But obviously, like most general managers, he doesn't want to directly discuss the contract situation. He wants to keep that in-house. Totally respect that. And, he doesn't know when this is going to come together. He sounds confident that it eventually will. It's just a process that you kind of have to work through. He's seen this sort of thing before in Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City right now is dealing with a situation of their own with Orlando Brown. So he's seen this sort of situation before. Yes, he's a young GM, but he's been well prepared for this kind of thing. And I think he knows how to work through it. It's just, as we discussed, it's a little trickier because of no representation for Roquan. So he's trying to navigate the personality that Roquan is off the field, which is kind of unknown because we know what he is on the field. He's a great leader. He plays hard. He works hard, but he's not exactly the most experienced negotiator when it comes to contracts. So Poles has to be very delicate with this because one wrong move and Roquan could take it the wrong way, and all of a sudden everything's derailed in terms of your negotiations. So it's a very delicate process.
For sure, and I think Poles really seems unfazed by this situation because someone asked him in the press conference, how have you kind of dealt with or how have you reacted to challenge after challenge this offseason? And, you've had the arrests, they've had the Larry Ogunjobi deal falling through, they've had, having to navigate the draft by not having a draft pick.
Offseason for him. Yeah.
Exactly. Trading Khalil Mack and dealing with that, letting Akeem Hicks go. Like, there's just been a lot going on for him. And now Roquan Smith, which is, it's such a no-brainer move for this team, and yet here they are, right? And I think it was Jason Leisure who basically said, "How did you guys find yourselves here when it's so obvious that this needs to happen?" And he's staying his course because he's a young GM. He doesn't want to be taken advantage of. He doesn't want to, mess up things in his first year. He's going to take it slow and methodically, and I think he's done a good job. He's eventually gotten to where he needs to go by staying the course. They signed 2 offensive linemen, Michael Schofield and Riley Reef, and we'll get to that. But, after so many people clamoring for more depth on the offensive line. So he's slowly making his way through the checklist. I think he's going to get to Roquan pretty quickly. Clearly the team, like Jalen Johnson, they're all expecting this very quickly. So, I
think Justin is too. I think a lot of these guys are. I mean, we heard Justin talk about him in a lot of post-game press conferences last year when things weren't going well. there's certain I don't know who said this, but I thought it was Justin. It was certain voices are louder than others in that locker room after a win and after a loss. And you can almost certainly infer that Roquan's is one of the loudest in that room, being heard by a lot of those guys, especially now on a young team. So I think even though it's not as valuable as that, 3-tech position or maybe the secondary here, and you're not playing, the most important linebacking position in Eberflus's defense, I still think he's still your best player. You still got to pay him. And unless you maybe get a package that's like 2 first-round picks, but who's offering that? I don't see for a linebacker that seems a bit excessive. So I think he's worth more to you than a trade would be. But I mean, what's the threshold? Do you 2 first-round picks trade him? Because I'm not doing it for one, a first and a third.
Drew and I actually discussed this. If there's a player-for-player type swap you can make that somebody the Bears need, I offer DK Metcalf as an example because Pete Carroll, he's a defensive guy. He likes his athletic linebackers. They just lost Bobby Wagner. If they don't want to pay DK Metcalf the money that he wants, and the Bears obviously need wide receivers, they'd welcome DK, whereas you can give him Roquan, and all of a sudden they have that defensive presence that they lost with Bobby Wagner. It was just, an idea, but that's sort of one thing you could do if the other team doesn't want to give up too many picks. It could be a player-for-player swap sort of thing.
And that's the argument, right, is Roquan Smith is a for sure top 3, 5, but elite player at his position, one of the most elite players in the league. When you're taking, even if it's multiple first round picks, you are hoping to get a player like Roquan. So, you have someone in hand, a player for player deal, like Eric just mentioned, someone like DK Metcalf, who would be a good fit on the Bears, would be an interesting, hypothetical. Someone like, but in the case of a 2 first round picks, I mean, you have to consider it, because you're talking about, at the end of the day, still about a position that is just not valued as much in today's NFL anymore. No matter how good Roquan is, there are limits to how much value he may bring on the field, especially in an offensive league. So it's a tough thing. I mean, Ryan Poles has to balance all of this and answer those questions. And right now, I think the clear answer is extend him. But if, we get to, let's say an injury happens in training camp or something happens and a team loses, let's say Darius Leonard goes down in Indy and all of a sudden they need an inside linebacker or they need someone to take Leonard's spot and Roquan's available. And they're going to say, hey, we'll give you 2 first round picks and a third round pick. I don't envy Ryan Poles here.
I think this all boils down to the conversations they're having behind closed doors, right? This has to be about the team that they want to be this year. Do they want to be? Their schedule's weaker than last year, obviously. They got a ton of, their roster is being destroyed on national TV day in, day out. If you watch NFL Talk, whether it's, ESPN or Fox, Justin Fields has nothing. Their offensive line stinks. New head coach. He might leave after this year. It's all negative talk. So I think behind closed doors, what team they really want to be this year? Do they want to be a team that believes that they can succeed with the roster and the schedule, the favoring schedule that they have, and make a play for a wild card spot this year? Or do they know they're going to be bad, get a top 5 pick? Because if it's that, then I think a trade for 2 firsts is more enticing, because if you can get 2 first round picks in next year's draft, and with all the cap space you're already going to have going into next year, that might suit you better for a window and keep your window, a little bit closed until, a year or 2 down the road when you're really going to see what this team is made of. So that conversation behind closed, because the NFL is a year-to-year league. I mean, unlike, I say this all the time on our show, it's not baseball. This isn't basketball. The NFL, you can be bad one year and be good the next year. So if they don't think that they're going to be great this year, they could be really good next year. If Field succeeds and they want to, extend the window and trade Roquan, they could still be very good next year without Roquan on this team. Is what I'm trying to say. So, but I think if you want to, if this team really believes that they could turn some heads this year, I think Roquan will play and he'll be extended shortly.
And the funny thing is, I think a lot of this has to do with Justin Fields as well. If he plays well this season, then you want to keep Roquan on the roster because that makes the idea of competing in 2023 much more viable because you have a star on defense ready-made entering his prime. And if Justin continues to ascend, all of a sudden a team that looked, probably primed for a 2 or 3 year rebuild might be able to compete sooner. Exactly. You got your $90 million in cap space. You're going to be, probably, I'd say top 15 at least in the first round. You can get yourself a couple of really good players, and all of a sudden you're in the mix. So it's weird how there's so many things that can sort of affect the course of where this team goes, and it all sort of pivots around the quarterback position.
Any chance to do a player swap from Jay? We just kind of mentioned this. I doubt it. I think it would be for picks. But, I mean, hey, if they really believe in Fields and that there's a guy like DK out there, but I don't know how that would suit Seattle either. I think that's, they're in a weird place. They have no quarterback. And truth be told, you never know. Those two wide receivers could demand a trade, Lockett or DK. But I'll be honest, I don't know if I think DK is good, but I don't know. Maybe hold out and try and get somebody else that might be even better. I don't know. Not for Roquan, but I mean, like in free agency next year or a different trade and try and keep Roquan.
Sure, the possibility is there. Just to close the loop on Jay, I mean, the possibility is there if there's a really good offer. But for the team, the deal that would happen this year for Roquan Smith, because this is the last year, or I think this is the last year of his deal, right?
Yeah, he's on his last year.
The deal that would have to happen this year would need to be very likely for either a player who's under contract for longer or somebody they think can help them win this year, but they're not going to be competing this year. So very likely it would have to be someone who can help them beyond this year, or it'd be a trade for picks.
Mm-hmm. Well, we just got some news in, but before we talk about that, let us know in the comments. You want to extend Roquan? Would you trade him for 2 first-round picks? Simple question. Go ahead and answer in the comments. Let us know. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at ClubDub_podcast. Again, we are broadcasting from our homes, and we are back weekly shows now that the season's officially underway. Feels great to say that. I'll tell you, I had a lot of fatigue watching that Cubs game today, seeing Wilson Contreras in his last at-bat at Wrigley likely this year. I'm ready for football. I know it's a 12-month sport, but the season is actually underway now with training camp. It feels good. Even if this team isn't going to be competing this year, like you just said, Drew, maybe they think they will. I'm not trying to puff any smoke into Bears Twitter because we all know what that does. But listen, maybe they think they're going to be better than the respect that they're getting, and I who knows? But I think I will say this: I think Roquan gets extended. So let us know in the comments what you guys think. The news of the day, obviously, Bears adding Riley Reeve, former Bengals lineman there, and Michael Schofield as well, who's been in the league, in and out of the league for the last couple of years, a veteran. 2 offensive linemen. And Brad Biggs just tweeting this. Thanks for putting this in our chat. So Riley Reef signed that contract. It's 1 year. So it's a $3 million base salary. He can get another $4.5 million if he's on the field for 10% of offensive snaps, and if the team improves in any of the 6 offensive categories. So Biggs said he doesn't know the categories. I would assume what categories would have to be: total yards per, like yards
passing
per game,
yards, rushing yards.
I would assume
things that the offensive line can directly impact, that sort of thing.
Right.
He can get another $2.5 million is tied to playing time, and there's another $2 million in a playoff bonus. So I mean, people were freaking out. Oh, it's way too much money, and Bengals fans saying overpaid. And this is the exact reason. Like you would think after all of these free agent signings that people would get a little bit smarter and you'd read between the lines. This is a great signing for the Bears. Are you kidding me? This is a no-risk move. They had plenty of cap space, and they needed depth at the line, or other Fields was going to get killed. This is a great signing for them. I don't care if he sucks. This is a great. I mean, what if he doesn't play? Then they're out what, $3 million? Big deal.
The process is very good. I thought the deal was good even before we learned that it's basically largely incentive laden. I mean, there is almost no risk to get somebody who has started a lot of games, is still relatively young. He's only 33 and can play several positions on the offensive line this late in the offseason. It's remarkable. It honestly is remarkable. They're getting a starting caliber player this late in the offseason. And I mean, two. Yeah, exactly. With Michael Schofield as well. This is unbelievable process. And I put this on Twitter today. At the very least, assuming healthy, of course, at the very least, what they have done is they have raised the floor of this offensive line at 2 positions, which is amazing. So good job, Ryan Poles. Obviously,
Yeah, this is a good job.
And a lot of fans were impatient, like, hey, what are we going to do about the offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. Well, hey, they made 2 very good moves, 2 starting caliber players who are going to come in and compete. That's great process. I'm very, very proud of the Bears today.
In addition to that, it allows them to take their time with the younger guys like Jatir Carter, Zachary Thomas, Braxton Jones. All of a sudden, you've got 2 veterans in the mix now. You've got more depth. You've got more competition. And if you go with those 2 guys, which I expect they probably will, all of a sudden you're able to take your time with those guys and develop them properly. Then next year, when they've had a season under their belt and gotten used to the NFL speed, then you can start really, sort of inserting them into that competition for a serious starting gig. And I think that's sort of what they wanted. And, it took a little longer than we expected, but I think part of it was, just timing. And I think if I recall correctly, Reef was dealing with an ankle injury that ended his last season. So he was probably taking his time to get healthy before actually getting into the mix. So the Bears actually, played this kind of perfectly because they got a guy, he knows he can earn that money. He's a solid veteran. He's 33 years old, and he played pretty well last year before he went down for the Bengals. He was a big part of helping them get to the Super Bowl, even though he didn't play in the playoffs. So, he's proven that he can be more than serviceable when he's healthy, and by all accounts, he should be healthy now. So they got themselves a really solid player there. Schofield, not much of a run blocker, but a really solid pass protector. So Justin Fields should be very happy with this development over the past 24 hours.
And I think that looking at both of their Pro Football Reference pages, what did we say on Sunday? I said 2 things in particular. Yes, they needed depth. They got that. But Ryan Poles does not sign guys with injury histories. I know that Riley Reef, he got hurt last year, but looking at his page right now, I mean, played in all 16 games, 2012, 2013, 15 and 2014, all 16 in 2015. 14, 15, 13, 15, 15, and then just 12. So he's got an incredible injury-less report. Like his pay, he doesn't get hurt. Basically what I'm trying to say, if I could speak English. Michael Schofield from 2015, 13 games played in, 16 games, 15, 16, 16, 11, and then 12, and 15 last year. These are guys that, and then the season that he started 11, he was a backup. He only started in 3 of those games. So 2 guys with not a big injury history, low risk moves. And truth be told, Tevin Jenkins, we don't know what he is yet. I think this can light a fire underneath him too, no? Like, he's got to earn his spot. He had a lot of promise coming out of college. Everybody was excited about him. He barely even played last year. And when he did, it was hard to watch. I mean, he was bad. I mean,
this is a great measuring. It's a great measuring stick for both him and Borum, because now they're not going to be handed anything. If you want to play, you're going to have to earn it over these guys. If the veterans play, nobody will be surprised because, they have extensive starting experience. They've played well in the past. Nobody would be surprised. But if Borum or Jenkins ends up starting over one of them, that tells you that the coaches saw something that they really wanted to see, which would be even more encouraging for what's to come for the Bears. So it's a perfect situation, sort of a win-win. If the veteran plays, fine, that the offensive line should be good. But if one of the youngsters actually steps up and wins the job outright, that's even better because it gives them a good long-term profile for what's to come.
For sure. And this makes me more curious. I think someone asked this during the press conference today is, who's going to line up right in your initial alignment here at offensive line? And just like you'll find out tomorrow. But look, these guys were clearly healthy enough to sign. They passed a physical. Hopefully they're in game playing shape. But even if not, at the very least, you've raised that floor. So not only does that increase the competition at the starters, at the depth positions, what Eric was saying, some of the younger guys who were just drafted, like Jaquan Carter and Kramer and folks, Zachary Thomas, they're all able to essentially just sit back and learn, not be worried about being thrust into the starting job right away. I'm very excited to see what this means for Tevin Jenkins. I mean, everyone's kind of talking about him this offseason as if he's just kind of like a guy, just wondering where he's going to be and kind of like this puppet, like, like controlled and just going to be put wherever.
Yeah, they've been talking about putting him at guard. Is he going to play a tackle? Right. Like, where is he going to play? Right.
Exactly. So this allows the coaches to really figure out where he should be instead of just being like, okay, these are the pieces we have. and we're not sure about any of them. So let's just like pick something and hope for the best. This allows them to actually do good process. And hopefully, the young guys are able to come in, step in and play really well and convince the coaches they deserve to start. And that would be awesome, because then you have 2 starters who are now backups on offensive line, and it immediately becomes a strength of yours. When just 2 weeks ago, we were talking about this unit as, oh my God, it's one of the worst in the league.
I mean, truth be told, I don't know if many remember this. Maybe we blocked out last season because it was, they struggled immensely last year across the board offensively. But I mean, Tevin Jenkins was bad. He was bad every
Even
time.
when
He was injured when he came back. But I mean, there was one game, at least 1 or 2 games where there was at least 3 to 4 holding penalties on him, back to back drives. I mean, he struggled. I don't know. Again, he probably wasn't 100%. I can't imagine trying to be an offensive lineman with a back injury. I mean, that just sounds grueling. You're standing up. You're basically hands to the ground the whole time. Even if you're just squatting down, you're moving up and down. Every, that sounds grueling. And you're going against guys who are, 300 pounds. And so I vouch with him on that, and I'm with him on that. But this is, let's be honest, all that matters right now. We know this team isn't going to be that great. It matters about Justin Fields and his protection. And if you're going to have holding penalties and put him behind the 8 ball, you're not going to start games. And that's what I really like about these signings. So, again, Bears adding Riley Reef, Michael Schofield, the husband of Kendall Coyne Schofield, the USA women's hockey player. I met her this year, actually, in the Blackhawks broadcast booth when I was covering a game for WGN. She's very cool. She also works on the hockey operations side for the Hawks, too. Yeah,
that's
she's
awesome.
Great. Yeah. We were kind of hoping that maybe she, with all the changes going on in the broadcast booth over there, we were kind of hoping that maybe she might take a swing at being a color analyst or something, but I think she's committed to the player side. So really good for both of them, honestly, because, playing 2 sports and traveling like they do, I think there was something out there. I can't remember which reporter put this out there, but they only saw each other you could count it on 2 hands, the amount of times they saw each other during football season last year. So, I mean, this is good for them on a human level too. So happy for them. And so it's very cool to have kind of you get a little bit of both here in the city, a little hockey, a little football. But yeah, good news for the Bears. Offensive line depth. We needed that. I feel good about it. Now, the real question is, what kind of release are we going to get on these guys? Is it going to be like this? Or are we going to get something more like, man, we're really happy to have him. We're looking forward to and contributing to our success. Thanks for coming. I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for the Ryan Poles release. Which one are we going to get, if we get one at all? We might be past that now.
Considering the fact that both of them are probably going to be starters, I would guess probably the latter in that category, because you want to send the right message that we believe these guys are really going to help us, whereas we believe these guys are probably going to be back end of the depth chart camp bodies or the like. So, I'd venture the latter if and when we actually do see those tweets, but, still a fun topic to discuss.
Hilarious. Poles did introduce, or at least announce both of those signings in his press conference today in his opening statement. So maybe that's their introduction. They don't even get a tweet.
Well, this guy got a tweet and then he got arrested. So, we'll see if he's right. I believe he was one of the 3 arrested.
Not him. It was Matthew Adams.
It was Adams. Yeah. Sorry, Quan.
Linebacker.
Matthew Adams. Yeah. So still on the roster. Poles was asked about that today, and if that had any reason to do with the firing of their
Soup Campbell.
Yeah. And he didn't really go into too much detail on it, but he did say that they wanted more discipline in the a difference of opinion, and he wanted more of a sports psychologist to be in that role. So to me, I'm sure that it had something to do. At least that had to have played somewhat of a role, having 3 of your players arrested in the offseason. Certainly not a good look.
It's not a good look, and I don't blame Poles for going that route at all. That kind of adds up, I would say, as far as the timeline goes, having the 3 arrests and then deciding to make the change. I don't think they've had any arrests since that firing. I think the arrests happened early enough where they could have done it before July 4th weekend, but it's just an awkward timing thing. But again, it's not a huge deal. I agree with the premise of it in terms of what Poles is trying to do, what he's trying to bring into that role, given what the role is supposed to do. We'll see if it works. But I agree with the need for more discipline. I agree with the need for connecting with the players at a level where they are not just having a friend in the locker room, but, have someone that can help them specifically, not just be an ear, but also be someone who can give them good advice.
And I also think that this goes back to Poles' initial thoughts about the team before he arrived. I think he believed that the team wasn't mentally tough enough, and it showed a lot over the past few years. Even during the 2018 season, when they got into the playoffs, it was clear that the Eagles had a greater mental edge in that game than the Bears did, and it showed. So I think he's looking for a sports psychologist specialist in order to help them better understand the difficult mental side of playing football. And I think that's actually a good point to take, because it's easy to take care of the body. You've got your strength and conditioning program, your nutritionist, all that sort of stuff. But the mental side of the game is never taken seriously enough by a lot of teams. And I think he finally understood that, and he felt that Soup, for whatever reason, wasn't capable of providing what the players needed in his mind.
News of the day today, Bears adding offensive lineman, putting pen to paper with Riley Reef and an incentive-heavy contract. It's a great contract for the Bears. Don't let Bengals Twitter or people say, this guy stinks. No, whatever. He gets $3 million base salary. Everything else is incentive-based. Got to pay 10% of the offensive snaps to get $4.5 million more. There's a $2 million playoff incentive in there. So it's a great contract for Ryan Poles. This is a win for him. The biggest news, though, Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith both reporting to camp. They're both in Halas Hall. Roquan is not practicing as of right now, but he is there. Robert Quinn, we don't know if he's practicing yet. But again, he has ended his holdout. He is there. So whether or not he starts the season in the Bears uniform, I think that's the biggest question mark still, is if Robert Quinn actually plays a couple downs or plays one down in a Bears uniform this year. I would say the odds are favoring yes right now, just because we're getting to the point where trades are less and less likely. We're starting to see veterans start to sign for, we saw, today Julio Jones signs with Tampa. We're starting to see more veterans begin to sign with their teams, and with training camp now underway. But trades this time of year, not as prevalent. So Roquan Smith reporting as well. So news of the day. Let us know what you think in the comments. Would you trade Roquan? We talked about that earlier. We talked about Robert Quinn. Would you trade Robert Quinn? And retire. Let's talk about what everybody wants to talk about right now, and that's Justin Fields. I think that's everybody wants to talk Fields all the time. Eberflus had some really good comments about him today. Praised his leadership. He's doing a great job right now. His footwork's better. Everything about that he had said has been better. And Fields talked a little bit more about how him and Mooney continue to work out. They're pushing each other. It could be a big year for those two. I expect it to be, if both are healthy, this offense is going to be a lot of David Montgomery and a lot of Darnell Mooney.
No question. I mean, right now the Bears aren't focused on, they're obviously focused on getting everybody connected and, improving the chemistry and all that sort of stuff and the execution. But right now they're sort of building Justin from the ground up. They want his footwork right. They want his mechanics right. They're getting his hips more involved with his throws, which will increase velocity and hopefully improve his overall, getting it out faster. So that's what they're focused on right now. And as they improve that process and smooth it out, everything else should sort of fall into place. And it sounds like he's embracing every part of what they want him to do in terms of working it out, not just in film study, but on the field, sort of putting pen to paper in that process. So, it sounds like Justin was immediately bought into what they wanted to do. Getsy has an idea of where they want to get, and Eberflus has been at his back every single step of the way. He's involved himself in the process without being overbearing, as a head coach usually should. So it's really encouraging to see them all sort of embrace the process of getting Justin where he needs to be. Voices are pointed in the same direction, and I think they're encouraged by what they've seen thus far. Obviously, we need to see it applied in games, but to see it all sort of go this smoothly already is a good sign, at least.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I think all of the developments to this point about Justin Fields in terms of his leadership, in terms of his ability to work hard and learn the playbook and invest himself and just be the leader that everybody was hoping that he could be. I don't think anybody doubted that. I think everybody figured Fields is going to be that guy. He's going to be the person that you want to go to battle with and go take the field with and just be that leader, right? I think the biggest.
Yeah, we heard that about Mitch too. You know, quarterbacks are just they've been doing this forever. They're born leaders, right? We need to see more than just that.
Exactly. So I think when you get to the field, you get on the field, you are executing the plays. It's scripted plays. It's, you're not getting hit. Go out and dominate. Go out and show the mechanics that are supposed to be better. Go out and show the footwork that's supposed to be better. Go out and show the quicker release that's supposed to be there now. Show the accuracy that you've been built. Go out and dominate. No good practice here, bad practice there. I mean, these are all in your favor. Go win the day. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to be hearing about out of training camp. I have no doubt about Fields, the leader. I have no doubt about Fields, the teammate. I have no doubt about Fields, the hard worker. It's all about, can you translate it to the field? I'm excited to follow that part. I don't care about the rest. I don't think any of us are doubting the rest.
Let's hear from QB1 on his relationship with Darnell Mooney.
Just being with Mooney more, just his work ethic, and just his mindset on things, he got drafted in the 6th round, something like that, and just seeing how he's progressed, these past 2 years, and just seeing how hard he works. I think I've said this before, but he pushes me to be better, and I think we push each other. So we got together a couple times over the break, and we come here 10:30 at night, just throwing routes, stuff like that, and just trying to get our time together. So it's just great, having him, of course, being the leader of the receiver room, and we're just trying to get more guys on board.
I mean, so there you go. Fields talked about his relationship with Mooney, them staying into burning the midnight oil at Halas Hall in the offseason, reading plays together, working out together. I think that's really important. And, he called him the leader of the wide receiver room. That should come as a shock to nobody. That wide receiver room is full of guys still trying to prove themselves. Byron Pringle, Equinemius St. Brown, Velus Jones Jr. is a rookie, hasn't even played it down in the NFL yet. A lot of guys there that still have to make names for themselves. And Mooney, I believe, could be, like I said, if this offense is going to go as him and Fields go right now, and barring any major trade, this is what they have to work with. It's promising to hear that they're on the same page and they're working together. But like I said, all that talk is cheap. It's practice. I need to see it now. Training camp. I want to hear. I want to see the proof now. I'm cool with the talk, and I will talk about it on the podcast now, and we'll talk about it. The cool quotes that'll come out of training camp. But as far as this, his leadership's great. He's improving. This is going to be one of the final times that we talk about it until we actually start seeing some proof. It has to be.
And the best part about this is Ryan Poles was on top of it from the very beginning. He said in the recent 1920 Football Drive episode, he was talking to Eberflus on the field. He said, I talked to Darnell and Cole Kmet and told them to get with Justin during the offseason as often as you can and really work on that chemistry, because the earlier you can build it, the more it'll show up on the field when you actually start playing the games. And that's the sort of advice you absolutely have to give your players so they understand how the process works. And it sounds like they really took that to heart. Mooney's been basically connected to Justin's hip from the start of the offseason, and Cole's done his part as well. So I think provided they stay healthy and they take to the offense relatively quickly, it's going to show up, pretty early in the season that they're going to have that chemistry that they clearly didn't have last year because Justin wasn't allowed to work with them due to Nagy's negligence.
For sure. And quite frankly, when the general manager gives you that advice, it's not optional. So,
yep.
So I'm glad to see they took it to heart. To Rich's comment there, I really want to see Kmet take a leap this year. I think we all do, for sure. In fact, I think the Bears are really counting on him doing that. So, I'm excited about seeing this come into light. I think we talked about this last podcast, but a few of the things that we're looking forward to. Who's going to emerge next to Darnell Mooney as far as wide receiver 2, right? You have a few options that are intriguing by, Byron Pringle, maybe Velus Jones Jr., even though he's more of that classic slot 3 guy at this point. Maybe someone like N'Keal Harry is able to make that jump. Like, those are the kinds of things. That chemistry is what I want to see that understanding the timing, the going back and fighting for your quarterback and like coming back when a play breaks down, like following him to the other side of the field, those kinds of things. Like just do the basics well, execute the basics. If you don't screw up the basics, you're going to be already at least just a bare minimum football team, and they haven't even been that.
Well, let's be honest and fair about Kmet. I don't think he's been bad. There's been a couple bad drops from him this year, but if you go back and you look at guys who have been drafted highly in that tight end position, the rookie tight ends don't do shit in the NFL. They don't. It's a hard position to play, and they don't. The numbers don't back it up. I mean, you get guys occasionally like Darren Waller who light the world on fire. But those guys are a dime a dozen. Like they don't pop up. They're really hard to find. It's that third year for tight ends where you start to see them emerge. Even second year, some guys. Why can't I think? I'm horrible with names. Who is the T.J. Hawkinson, Lions, highly drafted, highly recruited guy, supposed to be. Everyone's like, oh, best tight end in the draft. He's next to Travis Kelce. Sucked his first year. Second year. Not great. Last year, I believe he got hurt, but you started to see the progression of him in that, third to fourth year. That's where that comes along. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a comfort thing, but it's a common trend with tight ends in the NFL. So this is a big year for Kmet. Help him find the end zone a little bit more. I think that has to be top of mind.
It's absolutely a big year for him, and he knows that because his own rookie contract is going to become a discussion relatively soon. So, but also you need to always have context. He had over 600 yards, which is a decent year for a tight end, and the fact that he did it in Nagy's offense with 3 different quarterbacks throwing him the football should not be ignored. He was still able to remain productive. Does he still have stuff to work on? Absolutely. He needs to be a better target in the red zone, and he needs to hold onto the football more often. And he even admitted this during one of his last pressers. So he's not ignorant of the fact that he has to improve certain parts of his game, but the fact that he did improve from his rookie year to last year, despite some of the problems he had to deal with, is encouraging. And I think he's going to take another step forward, especially now that his chemistry with Justin should be better.
I mean, listen to this too. 2019 for TJ Hawkinson, his rookie season, 367 yards catching, 2 touchdowns. His second year, he made the Pro Bowl, only had 723 yards and let's see here, 6 touchdowns. So, and that was a Pro Bowl season for him. 2021, last season, in 12 games, 583 yards. Listen, like TJ Hawkinson is regarded as one of the best tight ends in the league. He's one of the highest picked tight ends in fantasy drafts every year. And I get that we want, everybody wants to have a great tight end. Everybody wants, he was the first pick by the Bears a couple years ago. He better be great. He didn't have a bad year. The drops were not great. Yes, the hands were bad in certain spots, and he didn't find the end zone as much. But I'm telling you, the first couple of years for tight ends, the NFL, the track record proves it over and over again. It takes these guys some time for whatever reason. And even, I know Hawkinson only played 12 games last year, but again, he had 4 touchdowns and only in less than 600 yards. So you could argue that, Kmet had a year on par with that. So let's give him this year. It's a bit right contract coming up. I think that this is going to be a year for him to compete.
And one other thing you probably shouldn't ignore was he was very young when he got to the NFL. I believe he was 21 years old, so he was still really young for a draft pick. And he split his time between football and baseball in college. So he wasn't entirely focused on the tight end position as he probably should have been. So he took a little more time to develop than most tight ends his age probably do. So that's another reason to believe that this year is probably the year you should really expect him to take a big step forward. So, all the more reason to be encouraged about where this is going, because I think the Luke Getsy offense is great for tight ends. It's great about getting them open in the flats. It's great about getting them open down the center of the field, depending on situation with bootlegs, play action, something that the Bears didn't do enough last year. And he still managed to be productive. So now that he's in a more, friendly system for tight ends, he's more experienced, he's more confident, and he's got a connection with his quarterback. It all lines up for him to have a good year, health permitting, of course.
Yeah, and I'm excited to watch it. I think that, to the point that you just laid out, Eric, he has flashed the ability to be someone who can make tough catches. He hasn't always done that, especially in key moments. We remember that end zone drop against the 49ers in one of Fields' best games. And there was a couple others that kind of come to mind. I think there was one against the Packers as well, which was, just like, So plays like that, I think he needs to convert on. But I think from a young tight end, I think he's going to be 23 this year and already in his third year in the league. I think he's on a good path, and I'm excited to see what he does. That being said, I think the Bears also did well by adding pretty decent depth, especially in this scheme. So probably people that Komet can learn from. Guys who have played in this scheme before, who have had success. I mean, they're not world beaters, but they've played well, and they've been reliable targets at times. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited for him to learn, and I'm excited to see him, just take that next step with Fields as his quarterback.
Getting comments rolling in here. Brooks Stott, Cole gonna smash this year. Appreciate you tuning in. Rich Brown's been a great contributor all day. I agree with Nagy's scheme did not include Cole. We traded Greg Olsen at a time when coaches thought he didn't fit the scheme. That was a mistake at the time.
Still hurts.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Olsen is the best tight end we've seen in the last 15 years, Bears uniform. So
the great irony of that trade was Olsen was the focal point of the win the Bears had over the Seahawks in the playoffs. Martz used him the way he should have used him, and then they trade him about a month later. That is just incredible to me.
Yeah, incredible stupidity by past Bears regimes, no question. Guys, keep commenting. We love to see this. Again, if you're just tuning in, I'm Kevin Wells, Drew Cole, Eric Lambert, talking on ClubDub Podcast. We are presented by sportsmockery.com. Hanging with the Cats, talk about the new additions up front. Eric, we talked about them early on in the show. We'll mention it again. Again, it's Riley Reef and Schofield, two veteran offensive linemen with good injury histories. Fits Ryan Pace's, checklist. Guys who
you did it too.
What?
You said Pace too.
Did I say Pace?
Yeah, we both said Pace.
Oh man. Okay. Well, we're gonna have to make so we do this on the I do a little work for CHGO too. We on the Blackhawks podcast, they have a swear jar with the Stan Bowman. If you got to
put new girl, is it like that new girl concept? Okay.
Yeah, it's every time they say Stan Bowman, thou who shall not be named, they got to put $1 in there. We got to make a Ryan Pace jar, even though Stan Bowman, much worse person than Ryan Pace. Ryan Pace doesn't seem like a bad guy. Ryan Poles is what I meant. And Riley Reef's contract is great. We talked about how it's very highly incentive-based. And Schofield, and these are two low-risk moves by the Bears, two guys who are going to start likely week 1, depending on how things shake out in training camp. And maybe these rookies, maybe some of these young guys change our minds. But, we think these guys are going to be week 1 starters, right? We can assume that.
At least one of them. But
let's go across the line. What are you thinking?
I thought everyone seems to think Reef is going to play left tackle. Maybe he will. I don't know. But because he played right tackle last year, I assumed that's where he was going to have. And then it was probably going to be between the other three, Jenkins, Borum, and Jones for the left tackle spot. I could be wrong. Maybe it'll be Reef at left tackle, and then it's going to be between Borum and Jones, or Borum and Jenkins at right tackle. So it could be either way. The Bears may experiment with both to see, what their best combination is. I think that's what they're actually intending to do. And they're trying to get their best starting 5 possible on the field. And I think they're going to experiment probably for the first couple of weeks to see what the best combination they got, and then use the remainder of training camp and the preseason to get them, together and getting that chemistry in place before the season begins. So it's one of those things that you just got to kind of let it play out. But I do think their interior is set. You've got Whitehair at left guard, Patrick at center, and now Schofield at right guard. That's a pretty solid interior, especially in pass protection circumstances. So once you've got that figured out, the tackle situation becomes less problematic because when it comes to pass protection, the interior is so much more important than the edges. So in that regard, I think it really fits what they're trying to do. And these two guys are bridge options. And as bridge options go, you could do a lot worse. And once you get into next season, I think they're going to focus again on the offensive line and the draft and just continue to stack the young guys that they have and try and build out something that they can have long-term. But for now, I think they've done a good job of sort of piecing together something that can work.
Yeah, I think Eric covered pretty much everything I wanted to say. But I will say for Hanging with Cat, we did cover a little bit more earlier in the show. So definitely go back and listen.
Yeah, last thing I'll add on that, I remember, I don't know who runs this new out of context Bears account on Twitter, but I do enjoy it. There's this, they just tweet out random videos and photos of
Like
old Bears
Adrian
players.
Peterson, like randomly
Yeah.
4-yard carry for no reason.
Yeah, it's just funny. I enjoy it. And one of the things he posted was, and this goes back to the interior line and how much more important it is for pass protection, especially with a guy like Fields. There's videos of Fields in that Pittsburgh game. I know that was his best game last year, but there's videos of him beating guys like TJ Watt to the edge. TJ freaking Watt.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Beating him to the edge. It's more about his interior and him getting sacked. He can beat those guys. He's top. His Madden rating for speed is 90. He's top 5 in that. I mean, the speed is not an issue with him. And again, this is why I'm enjoying, these additions from Poles. We've been critical of him for other things, but he's done a pretty decent. These two additions are very promising because it speaks to the plan that they want to have for Fields, and I really, I can see the plan. I can see it, and I can talk about it, and that's what's important.
It is important. There's actually a video of him also outrunning, making Nick Bosa look slow last year. Very slow.
I remember, yeah, Nick Bosa too. Yeah, maybe that was the video I was talking about. I know there's one with TJ Watt.
There's one with TJ Watt as well.
There's one for each. He did it to both of them.
I mean,
he's fun, man. It just some of that needs to be cleaned up. I hope it does. Anyway,
another thing I want
to the heart.
Yeah, we'll let it play on the field before we talk again. That's going to be one of our cardinal rules this year. Once training camp ends, we're going to stop talking about the football meatball-y takes. We want to see the proof on the field from QB1 in year 2. But another thing that really, what was that, Drew?
Can I get on a soapbox for a second?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Step on it. That's what the platform's for.
Very, very quick. The last thing I want to see from Bears Twitter is excusing anything that is coming across as a negative of Justin Fields. Every single time there's a reporter that goes out and says Fields had 3 dropped interceptions, or he looked wobbly, or he looked this. It's just one practice. Oh, it happens. It's just training camp. Shut the fuck up. That's all I had to say.
Damn, that's a hell of a
there you go.
I mean, hey, I'm going to be making. I'm rooting like hell for Fields. So you're probably going to hear some excuses out of me, no question. I'm going to make some.
We're all rooting for Fields, man. That's not my point. My point is,
no, but you're definitely the one who is more like, you're more clear-headed about certain things.
Yes.
So
I am.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, 100%. I especially when there's a double standard. There'll be another quarterback for example, even fucking Trevor Lawrence, for example, if he struggles in camp, fans will be like, oh, it's, he sucks, or Doug Peterson was clearly a bad this thing. They will be more level-headed with other quarterbacks. And I'm just like, I understand he's your quarterback. I understand you're a fan. I understand all that, but it is exhausting. Just let it be. Relax. Thank you.
Want to get to one other thing. Jaquan Johnson, who might go overlooked because of all of the contract talks and the craziness this offseason has been for the Bears. People forget Jaquan Johnson, one of the best cornerbacks in the league last year, was fantastic. He's a leader on this defense too. He talked about how Roquan is their leader, and he acknowledged that, but he let this one slip today.
Of some of the things that have changed with the new staff coming in, what have you liked? What have been some changes that you have felt like are really good changes around here?
Really good changes. I would just say with the consistency, really. They haven't really changed the expectations for anybody in the building. I feel like it really kind of takes it back to the fundamentals, really just playing football hard, playing football the right way. And I feel like they established a good sense of tough-nosed football. And I wouldn't say that our last staff didn't. I just think that their emphasis is a lot more. I feel like they're emphasizing really running to the ball. Like you guys know, we got to be in shape. We're going to be running a lot more. And it's everything just emphasized differently. Everything is just being harped on. And I mean, the way that they count loafs, the way that they just hold us accountable is is crazy compared to what we're used to really. But I mean, I feel like it's all. I feel like you can never be in too much shape. You can never be too physical. You can never play football hard enough. So I mean, I feel like it's all for good measure, for good purpose. But I mean, it's definitely going to be a challenge, and I feel like we're up for it.
So, taking a shot, but doing so respectfully at the past regime, and he might be right. I mean, this is the one thing we've heard. We've heard it on the Pat McAfee show. We've heard it from former players. We've heard it from guys like Darius Leonard and guys who are stars in this league talk about what's the common theme with Eberflus. It's his hard-nosed, run to the football, meatball-y football style, and maybe that's what the Bears need. Who knows? But they didn't have that the last couple of years.
I'm honestly sometimes a little bit wary of like that gym teacher type of coach.
Yeah, exactly. I know where you're going. I know where you're going with.
You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes that can wear thin. But look, this team has clearly been coached a very different way for the last 4 years, and I think when we've talked about this before, sometimes players and someone like Roquan Smith has said, "I want to be coached hard." Justin Fields, "I want to be coached hard," and maybe there wasn't enough of that, or maybe not in the right way. The last regime, and maybe someone like Matt Eberflus for now is a breath of fresh air. Now, of course, that has to translate because what he's going to make these players do as far as conditioning, as far as loafs and discipline and those kinds of things, that has to translate to results. If they're losing and consistently losing this year, next year, that's going to get old real quick. So it better translate to wins, but it's a fresh approach. I'm glad the players are buying in. That is very refreshing to see.
The thing about Matt Nagy that sort of stuck out was he never seemed to really pay attention to the smaller details of everything involved, which is why you get ill-timed penalties all the time, which is why you're turning the ball over too much, which is why the defense had a really bad tendency to fall apart late in games. That's where the attention on the little stuff, the little details that really matters. And I think that's something Eberflus is very different about. Every small mistake is harped on. Listen, you got a loaf right here. You didn't do your job here. All those little things. The players may not like it initially, but this is the coaches doing what they need to do to make sure that the players get better, and they can't accept even the smallest mistakes. Because if you accept small mistakes, it leads to bigger mistakes. And it all kind of snowballs on you at the worst possible times late in the fourth quarter when you're trying to win football games. And I think that's one of the reasons that hiring Eberflus was the right call, because he made it an emphasis from the start. We're going to harp on these little things, whether you like it or not. It's going to be tough. There's going to be days where you're not going to like it, but we're going to do it anyway. And that's what a good football coach has to do.
We'll end today's podcast on a very funny note. I love this news. Julio Jones signed with Brady over Rodgers today. Man, Tom Brady's got to be Tom Brady's a lot like, I think the NFL, it's obviously a player-driven league at this point, and we all have, I think baseball is more of an agent-driven league per se. Like Scott Boras is by far the most powerful man in Major League Baseball with controlling all of the league's best players. But Tom Brady has to be the most he's got to be the most powerful dude in the NFL. This dude can sign anybody he wants. He can retire and come back when he wants. But let's be honest. I mean, he's earned that title, right? I mean, the proof is there. I mean, he continues to win in the playoffs in the biggest moments and proves to be the best leader that the sport has ever seen. But this is just hilarious to me. I mean, the Packers were clearly interested in Julio Jones. What did we talk about on Sunday? Nobody's talking about how bad and piss poor their receiving core is this year. But everybody wants to rag on the Bears because, they have more questions. And they do. They have more questions because of the quarterback position. But Julio Jones signing with Tom Brady over Aaron Rodgers, I just think that's hilarious to me. And as a Bears podcast, we got to take full advantage and make fun of them while we can.
Oh, yeah.
They're still the best team in the division.
And look, I mean, who can blame him? You have a better quarterback, better team in theory, probably, maybe not an easier path to the playoffs. I think the NFC North is probably an easier division at this point. Yeah. But also, I mean, you look at the NFC South. New Orleans doesn't have. I mean, they're like Jameis Winston. I like Jameis Winston, but he's coming off an injury, a tough injury. Who knows how that's going to go? My boy Baker is now in Carolina, so obviously they're winning the division. Just kidding. And then the Atlanta.
Can they win the division by winning 4 games?
They're going to win, say, 8 games.
Oh, but I mean, it's a QB competition, though, isn't it?
No.
Oh, God. Listen, I was actually a big fan of Sam Darnold, but the Jets ruined him. He was damaged goods by the time he got to Carolina. It really sucks because I thought he was going to be a really good player. But, well, Baker still has a chance because he's played well. He knows he's played well. If he's healthy, he's going to win that job. And if the coaching staff doesn't completely blow it, he should be able to play well enough to at least get them in the conversation of a wild card spot.
I hope Darnold wins the job just for content of this podcast's sake.
No. No. It won't be.
It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. But I hope it happens. And I'm going to say it's not going to happen to reverse jinx it so he does win it. But
I will say this, that 5th-round pick they gave up is going to look like a steal by the end of this year. I think I don't know if he's going to play as well as he has in the past, but I think he's going to play well enough to prove that he can still be a good quarterback in this league.
He'll make himself some money for next year. I love how we turned this podcast and talking about Baker Mayfield. That's all I wanted for today. But no, going back to this, I think it's amazing that Jones picked the Bucs. I hope he plays more than 2 games, because he's always hurt, but
he's washed up now.
Well, this is one of the things, though, that last kind of soapboxy things. I still don't understand why people continue to think Aaron Rodgers is, he's a top quarterback in the league. I don't care if Brady's 44, turning 45. He was better than Rodgers last year, even though Rodgers won MVP. It's ridiculous. Of course players want to play with Brady. By all accounts, a better teammate, by obviously a better quarterback.
I think that's it. I think that's it. I think Brady is known across the league as a better teammate. I 100%. I think so. And I go ahead.
Sorry. The thing is, you have to remember the burden won't be on Julio in Tampa Bay like it would be in Green Bay. They'd lean on him. They'd have to lean on him a lot in Green Bay, and it would be not as good a weather, all that sort of stuff. Whereas in Tampa Bay, they already got Chris Godwin. They already got Mike Evans. Julio doesn't have that burden on him of having to be the guy. He can just be another factor in the passing game, and it won't be as hard on his body considering how many injuries he's had to deal with over the past couple of years. So I think it was a plus. At the end of the day, the Bucs offered more money, and you always follow the money in this league, and Julio went for that, which I don't blame him.
Yeah. So maybe a little bit of a misleading headline on my part, but hey, you know what? We're a Bears podcast. I'm gonna do that. This could also spell good news for the Bears because, I mean, that's a crowded wide receiver room now there in Tampa. Eric, I noticed you tweeted that too. You're like, keep an eye on this. They also have a guy named Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson's pretty damn good, fast, speedy wide receiver, young. Sounds like a Poles guy. I don't think that, he's not going to get cut by any means. He was a decent pick for them, and he's played well in the postseason games he's had in Tampa. But, I mean, it's a crowded room. There could be some moves made there to, make some space depending on who comes out. But yeah, it's all dependent on Julio's health at this point. So we shall see. See. Let's answer some questions in the chat before we get out of here. Let's see. Julio Jones does not want to play in the cold. Yeah, can't really blame him for that. Debo to the Vikings. That's bad news for the Bears, the NFC North.
Is that a rumor that's going around?
I don't know. I've never seen this rumor. I'm checking Twitter right now.
Makes no sense to me because they're already set a wide receiver.
Yeah, I have my Schefter notifications on. I feel like he would have broken that, so I'm not sure about that. Let's see. We had any chance they sign a wide receiver? I think that the room is pretty well set.
I think the trade for N'Keal Harry probably sealed that. Unless someone gets hurt, but I think they have a good bit of competition for now. Of course, they could always add somebody. I talked about Will Fuller on the last podcast. I know, Kevin, you disagreed, but I would like to see that as a camp body, for lack of a better word, and see if he can compete. But they have several wide receivers in here right now that can at least compete, right? They have Mooney, Velus Jones, Byron Pringle, Equinemius St. Brown, Daz Newsome, Dante Pettis, N'Keal Harry. That's 7 receivers right there. There's a few names like Chris Fink and others that were, making some waves in minicamp. So there's some names, obviously not a lot of star names, but it seems like decent depth at the very least.
And there's also the possibility that towards the end of training camp and the preseason, somebody unexpected gets cut that could be a contributor. The Bears have left their options open in that regard. They didn't give up all that much for Harry in the first place, a 2024 7th round pick, not a lot of money involved. So they have plenty of flexibility to go get somebody if somebody becomes available, but they don't have to at this point because I think they've done enough, at least in terms of creating a competition that can give Justin his options.
Well, I guess this kind of goes off of that question. Let's talk about, because maybe there's guys who, watch the NFL and they're wondering, of these signed guys who were signed this offseason, who are guys who are actually going to see offensive snaps? Byron Pringle's going to see offensive snaps. He's arguably your number 2. He's good, man. He's fast. He's got great hands. He was a great red zone target for Mahomes these last couple of seasons. He's going to see targets. He's going to be out there a lot. Bayless Jones is going to be out there a lot. It's him, Mooney, those 3. Those are going to be the 3 you're going to see a lot. N'Keal Harry, I think, is 4. After that, not going to see many of those guys. It'll be more special teams like Equinemius St. Brown, never did much in Green Bay. Dante Pettis, older guy, right? I don't even know.
No, I'd keep an eye on Simba Webster. I know nobody talks about him, but I think he's going to be a factor because of his special teams abilities. So don't ignore him as a possible number 6 guy.
Where did Pettis play, Drew?
He was recently in New York, which is probably why the Bears signed him, because their wide receivers coach worked with him. So nice little connection there.
Oh, the Giants. I'm sorry. Yeah. I thought you meant Jets for a second. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. So it's like guys like that where, I think they're just there to, maybe they could. Poles talked about this today too. It's an exciting time because you can see guys who are lower on the depth chart kind of emerge as, studs. But I think the 3 that I mentioned are the 3 you're going to see the most this year, barring, any surprising cuts from the end of camp. But no, man, football's back. It's a good time for us. We're got a lot of comments today, a lot of people tuning in and out, so I appreciate that. Big Bears news day. If you missed the show, go ahead. We got the rewind feature. You can go ahead and watch it on Twitter, YouTube, and our Facebook page, the ClubDub page. Go ahead and give us a follow as well. Follow our Twitter handles. You can find those on the page as well. But again, we're going to have a lot of more, a ton of content coming out of training camp. And we're going to be fair and balanced about it for the most part. Like Drew said, Fields had his rookie year. It was an unfortunate year. There was a lot of things going against his way. But, this year things are going his way, and he's been given what he's needed. So it's, this is the year that we can actually judge his play fully. And, no more of this, no making excuses for bad play. I totally agree with you on that. But Roquan reports, Robert Quinn reports.
It was a good day for the Bears. It was definitely a good day for the Bears.
It was this was solid offensive line ads with Riley Reef and Schofield. So anything else you guys want to add before we get on out of here?
I think we pretty much covered everything that needs covering, and we can wait to see what happens next.
First practice tomorrow. Let's go.
Yeah, can't wait to see what cops out of there. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into the ClubDub Podcast. For Drew and Eric, I'm Kevin Wells. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.